Breaking right now on Morning News Now, bombing backlash. This morning, Iran vowing to retaliate as we get our first look at the damage from this weekend's U.S. strikes. President Trump calling the direct attacks on 3 Iranian nuclear sites a spectacular military success, saying the enrichment facilities were completely and totally obliterated, and now suggesting a regime change in Iran.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Now, with the B-2 bombers safely back home, new concerns about what happens next.
Is the United States now at war with Iran?
No, Kristen, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. The Iranians have a choice. They can go down the path of peace, or they can go down the path of this ridiculous brinksmanship of funding terrorism, of trying to build a nuclear weapon, and that's just not something the United States can accept.
Here at home, anti-war protesters criticizing the U.S. for entering the decades-old conflict. And in Israel, billboards are up thanking President Trump as a new phase of war begins. Thank you so much for starting your week with us. A lot to cover on this Monday morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. Let's get right to it with our team of correspondents tracking the latest here in the U.S. and overseas. We're going to start things off with NBC News White House correspondent Von Hilliard. So, Von, we know during the election campaign, President Trump repeatedly painted himself as anti-war, vowing to end global conflicts. Now the U.S. has directly bombed Iran for the first time. So tell us why the president ended up getting involved in this conflict and just how it all unfolded.
Right. He had suggested that if he were president during the Biden administration, that Russia would have never invaded Ukraine. He suggested that Hamas wouldn't have attacked Israel. And here this weekend, however, it was the president that made a decision to use offensive tactics to go in and attack Iran at 3 particular nuclear sites here. This was, you could say, months in the making, or even 8 years in the making. If you go back to 2018, then President Trump pulling the United States out of the Iran nuclear agreement, which was an agreement that allowed for inspectors to go in, but it effectively, that agreement lifted sanctions on Iran. The president and his team were opposed to it, believing that they needed to tighten the strings around Iran. Fast forward to here in 2025, his administration sought to activate nuclear talks again with Iran. They had tried and wanted to force them to agree to not enrich any uranium whatsoever. After more than 2 months of negotiating, Israel a week ago launched initial airstrikes into Iran. And then just days later, here this weekend, the president making the decision to use the U.S. military to go and strike 3 particular nuclear facilities. The administration, as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, describing it as, quote, the final blow, though there's still a damage assessment of those 3 nuclear sites that is outstanding. So there's still a lot of questions here on this Monday, guys.
Von, we just played a moment ago Vice President J.D. Vance saying the U.S. is not at war with Iran, but rather at war with Iran's nuclear program. We heard a similar thing, actually, from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Then over the weekend, though, President Trump did bring up the possibility of regime change. This was on social media. Are the goalposts changing here?
They very well could be. The president is perhaps inconsistent sometimes in his foreign policy messaging, because it was just yesterday, in the hours after the attack, that you said his administration made it clear, from Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, to Marco Rubio and his own vice president, that this was a precision attack and that they immediately returned U.S. military personnel from Iranian airspace back to the United States after these attacks. And that is where the president, they had said that they came in with one mission and that they were able to fulfill that objective, and that was to take out the nuclear facilities. They did not target the Ayatollah or any other Iranian leadership. But then in a post last night, the president almost contradicting that, writing, quote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change, MEGA?" So those were the latest words of the president. Again, I think that this is where there's going to be much follow-up for this administration to answer about whether they seek to move forward with any other additional attacks after this, despite having previously over the weekend suggesting that if Iran doesn't attack the U.S. in return, that they would not and that they would stand down.
So, Vaughn, from a national security standpoint, just how concerned is Washington about retaliation from Iran, whether it's proxies hitting U.S. assets or interests in the region, or even worse, a terror attack here in the U.S.?
Right. Administration officials said they were particularly concerned about these first 48 hours after the attack, and the Department of Homeland Security put out a bulletin nationally warning Americans of increased terror prospects here domestically inside of the U.S. If you go back to 2020, the Trump administration, they had fired a strike and assassinated a top Iranian military general. And in response, Iran sent airstrikes to a U.S. military installation and airbase in Iraq that injured more than 100 American servicemen and women. And there was concerns. Iran had threatened that if the U.S. were to use offensive actions against it, like they did this weekend, that they would respond appropriately. And so there's the question of whether that would be a U.S. military installation, assets, but also the threat of potential independent sleeper cells, extremists here within the United States that could seek to attack on the behest of Iran. So we have not seen an attack here at this point in time, but U.S. Officials say that they are watching closely intelligence internationally overseas, but also are aware and heightened of the potential threats here domestically at home.
Vaughn, also over the weekend, we did see these anti-war protests break out across the country, including what you're seeing right now on your screen. That's in Washington. Is the White House concerned about the reaction from voters, including the president's own MAGA base?
Right. There was a lot of pushback, even from some of his strongest supporters, you could say. People like Steve Bannon, people like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who made emphatically the case that the U.S. should not be entering into another war of Middle East intervention. And there is this sort of alliance of skepticism about the potential impact, not knowing how Iran will respond or how this will affect Middle East relations. There was a great pushback to the U.S.'s decision to move forward with these strikes, as Marjorie Taylor Greene suggested that no Americans had been hurt or injured by Iranian military over the years. And so there's a lot of outstanding questions. I asked the president specifically about 20 years ago when he had expressed skepticism about the U.S.'s decision to enter into Iraq. He said this time was different, he said. He said he believed that Iran was potentially weeks or months away from making a nuclear weapon. There's a lot of questions about that intelligence, but this was a striking decision by the president of the United States this weekend. Joe, Savannah.
Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, kicking us off this hour. Thank you.
We have NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter joining us now from London with more international reaction here. Molly, good morning. So we're hearing reports of new attacks this morning from both Israeli and Iranian sources. Tell us first the latest on the fighting between the two sides.
Yeah, Savannah, Joe, good morning. The war is absolutely continuing, even though, as you just heard from Vaughn, so much of the focus now is on what Iran will do in response to the United States. But we are hearing reports, more strikes coming in from Iran into Israel this morning. You see the video on the screen released by the Israeli Defense Ministry in the north central parts of Israel. The Israeli Defense Ministry also says they have targeted the ICRG headquarters in Iran, as well as Evin prison. It's a notorious prison in the capital. The Israeli Air Force also said it neutralized, that's their word, a number of ballistic missile launch sites in Kermanshah, and they've also attacked 6 airports in the western, eastern, and central parts of Iran. They say targeting runways, hangars, and Iranian fighter jets. Guys, also by the numbers, I just think it's important to keep in mind, yes, we are talking about military targets, but also according to Iran's health ministry, 400 people have been killed in Iran, 3,000 injured in the last week and a half. And in Israel, according to the Israeli authorities, Iran's strikes have killed at least 24 people.
So, Molly, Iran's foreign minister has now arrived in Moscow to hold talks with Russian leaders. Help us understand what this could mean, and just also what we're hearing from Iran and its allies, like Russia and China.
Yeah, he has arrived, excuse me, Joe, and that meeting has happened. We actually, I believe, have some videos, some pictures of that meeting. We have some quotes. It was a Russian TV pool who actually covered that meeting, so everything we are getting is from Russian TV who was actually present. President Putin said an absolutely unprovoked aggression against Iran. He's referring to the U.S. Bombs over the weekend. It has no basis and no justification, he said. We have a long-standing, good, reliable relations with Iran. For our part, we are making efforts to assist the Iranian people. The readout we have from the Iranian side is also kind of emphasizes that partnership. He says, the foreign minister, as you noted, we have very close and friendly relations in recent years. Our relations, he says, have become strategic in nature. We constantly consult with our Russian colleagues on all areas and issues of global security. But guys, Russia has a very tough balancing act, right? They have always, and for decades, been very close with Iran. There's no sign at the moment that they are ready to step up kind of their military support or military backing for Iran against the U.S. or against Israel. They also have friendly relationships with Israel. And we know, you guys, we've chronicled President Putin's kind of friendship with the U.S. President Donald Trump. He wants to keep Donald Trump on side, of course, as they continue to fight in Ukraine. So Russia has a very urgent kind of balancing act of big decisions to make, and we'll be keeping a very close eye. But this is definitely the first kind of high-level publicized meeting of the two sides between Russia and Iran that we know of.
Molly, I also want to ask you about these protests we've been seeing against the U.S. bombing in cities around the world. There's concern also about the potential closing of the Strait of Hormuz. That's at the opening of the Persian Gulf, and about 20% of global oil trade passes through this totally critical waterway. How are global leaders reacting to the U.S. taking military action?
Yeah, incredibly critical, Savannah. And actually, I know you asked about China in the last question. I do just want to catch you up. If we're looking at the Strait of Hormuz, China is one of the big losers if Iran does kind of follow through with their threat to close the Strait of Hormuz. They buy about 90% of Iran's oil exports. And the Chinese foreign ministry, we have heard a statement. We've gotten a statement today, said the U.S. attack was a, quote, grave violation of the UN Charter. You guys, there was an emergency UN Security Council meeting yesterday where we got a lot of international reaction. But we're also hearing from the UK Prime Minister today. Take a listen to Keir Starmer.
We've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear program and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate. And I've been speaking with international leaders this morning to that end.
As that is the message from European leaders, get the parties back to the negotiating table. We also heard from the French foreign minister on social media. He said France is convinced that a lasting resolution to this issue requires a negotiated solution within the framework of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So you've got about European allies. We know that there was a big meeting in Geneva on Friday with the Iranians, but European allies and leaders are trying to get to avoid kind of any further escalation and trying to get the parties back to a negotiation. Guys.
All right, Molly Hunter, thank you very much.
Let's talk more about the reaction at home and bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin, who is live in Washington. Julie, good morning. So several members of Congress have questioned the legality of President Trump's decision to launch these strikes on Iran on Saturday, including, as Vaughn mentioned moments ago, some members of his own party. What are these detractors saying, and how are Republican leaders responding to the president's move?
Hey, guys, good morning. Well, it's illustrating the divide that we're seeing within the Republican Party, specifically within the MAGA movement nationwide. Of course, you're going to see that reflected in the building behind me. Thomas Massie, a Republican of Kentucky. To be clear, he's crossed the president before on his other agenda items, so there's been a little bit of the back and forth tension already. But he went on the Sunday shows yesterday, partnering with a Democrat to actually introduce a resolution that would kind of try to curb or curtail some of the powers the executive branch has taken back to Congress when it comes to military aggression, starting wars, and what have you in this area. Take a listen to what he said, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
I wouldn't call my side of the MAGA base isolationist. We are exhausted. We are tired from all of these wars, and we're non-interventionists. I mean, this was one of the promises. I mean, are you going to call President Trump's campaign an isolationist campaign? What he promised us was we would put America first.
Now, Meanwhile, you have most Republicans who are lining up behind the president, including the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who actually posted on X justifying the president and the administration's actions without notification to Congress. He said in a post that Trump, quote, evaluated that the imminent danger outweighed the time it would take for Congress to act. Guys?
Julie, let's talk about the other side of the aisle here. Several Democrats have come out strong against President Trump's decision. It includes Bernie Sanders. During a speech in Oklahoma on Saturday, he called the actions grossly unconstitutional. What else are Democrats saying?
Yeah, most Democrats feel this way, to be clear. And I think part of it has to do with how much they were briefed, what they knew when. There was a little bit of a back and forth over the weekend about this. For example, Speaker Johnson, John Thune were briefed with at least the location, some details before the strike took place. I was told yesterday that Leader Schumer did receive a perfunctory notification, but he wasn't even told where in the world this attack would be taking place. And it was already kind of imminent. You also have Democrats, rank and file members who are extremely angry about the situation, including Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, who actually posted on X suggesting the president should be impeached for this, using the I word there. Now, to be clear, we have not seen this echoed by Democratic leadership. This is certainly going to be a point of conversation this week. But when it comes to what the president did, Congress should be notified, should be briefed, and they did so within 48 hours of that military action. At this point, everything seems constitutional, but Congress has a lot of questions they want answered.
So, Julie, at the center of this debate on constitutionality is the War Powers Resolution. We know Democratic Senator Tim Kaine said he plans to force a vote on the Senate resolution he introduced last week. It would require President Trump to get congressional approval before taking any military action against Iran. Congressman Massey, who we just heard from there, he introduced a similar resolution in the House last week. What more can you tell us? And with Republicans controlling the House and Senate, does this even stand a chance in Congress?
Well, it's nothing more than a messaging tool, even if it were to pass, because in the Senate, they could vote on it as soon as this Friday. You could have some Republicans join. Rand Paul, for example, is somebody that I'm watching very closely, and it just takes a simple majority. But still, it is nothing more than a messaging tool, because what this resolution does is reaffirm the War Powers Act of 1973. Massey said yesterday he believes the executive branch misinterpreted it. Again, let's talk about what it does, right? The president does reserve the right to respond to imminent threats. Democrats and one Republican at least are questioning, was this really imminent? They don't have much information. They're going to have briefings that were already pre-scheduled before the U.S. strikes over the weekend, early this week, to get some questions answered. Again, what Republicans would tell you is perhaps the administration has intelligence that they just don't know about.
All right. Julie Zirkin. Julie, thank you so much.
Let's get more analysis now with Brian Katulis. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. Brian, thanks for being with us again this morning. So in the space of a few days, we saw President Trump resist calls from Israel to join in on these strikes on Iran, saying he would wait 2 weeks to make a decision, then carrying out the surprise bombing of the country's nuclear sites over the weekend. How do you interpret this shift in the president's stance on getting the U.S. involved in another Middle East conflict?
It's true to form here. He's erratic as ever. He's always on this pathway on foreign policy, but domestic as well. He prides himself in unpredictability. But the key thing I'm thinking about here this morning is, did these attacks actually do the job? We don't know that. We have statements from President Trump that the nuclear material in these sites were obliterated. We actually have evidence to the contrary. And this could be very dangerous right now, that the highly enriched uranium Iran may still have in other sites. So this is a problem with President Trump, is he's not only erratic, he also doesn't tell the truth. And we don't wait for the facts. He has narratives. And I think this is the very thing that we should all be worried about, is the very stated goal of actually eliminating Iran's nuclear program. These attacks may not have achieved that, nor have the Israelis just yet. And that's what we need to actually assess right now.
We've heard from many Western leaders right now who are urging Iran not to respond, instead return to negotiations. Clearly, that's what President Trump is hoping for. From Iran's perspective, how easy will that be, given they were in the middle of negotiations with the U.S. when Israel then launched these attacks on Iran a little more than a week ago? Then on top of that, the U.S. got involved. Has any remaining trust been eroded? Do you think there actually can be negotiations?
I think there can be negotiations, but the key word that you said there was Trump was hoping for negotiations. I actually think they're just hoping. They don't have a plan. I don't think you've noticed, maybe many people have not noticed, but Donald Trump has very few foreign policy successes in the world, especially when it comes to diplomacy. His Russia gambit has actually failed. And I don't see any sign that they're actually serious about diplomacy from the United States perspective. Your question on Iran is, I actually think Iran might look to some other partners in the region, neighbors, countries like Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, where they have ongoing conversations. There could be a pathway there. But back to my point about U.S. diplomacy, I think President Trump, Secretary Rubio, others think that diplomacy simply means putting out a social media post and then saying something provocative on a Sunday talk show. Diplomacy actually involves sitting down with your adversaries and trying to assess, okay, what damage was done, and then has the Iranian position moved? And right now, I don't see the Iranians moving in that direction, but if they see a pathway, it's most likely through their neighbors across the Gulf.
Brian, to your earlier point, how and when will we know how successful this mission was?
We may not know for quite some time because there's only so much satellite imagery can tell you. You actually need to have eyes on the ground. And there's some very worrisome trends. Again, we're only a day and a half into the U.S. attack. Just some signs that perhaps Iran was already moving some of this material around. And what I'm just saying is that, yes, I'd love to trust my leader, the president of the United States, when he says that the nuclear program was obliterated, but there's some evidence that that may not be the case, and that should worry all of us. What should also worry us is what Iran might do in terms of retaliation. This is a very dangerous state that has actually sponsored terror around the world, including in the United States. So we've taken an action, we've patted ourselves on the back, but the job may not be done.
Brian Katulis, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Turning now to the weather and the start of the week here in New York. And for millions on the East Coast, it is the beginning of a heat wave.
Even at the crack of dawn, it's hot out here. Michelle Grossman's keeping a close eye on this dangerous heat for us. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, we're talking about dangerous heat over the next several days. We're going to see temperatures 10, 20 degrees above what is normal for this time of year. And it's warm this time of year. So we're going to watch that at least through Wednesday in many spots and then get a little bit of a break. But right now, we're looking at 148 million Americans under heat alerts. We have heat advisories, heat watches, heat warnings. 75 million of those are under extreme heat warnings, and that's in that pink color there. It's all due to this area of high pressure. It's a heat dome tacked in place, bringing in this heat, but also bringing in humidity. So some spots will feel like 110 as we go throughout today and also tomorrow into Wednesday before we see a little bit of a break. We could see 150 records challenge over the next few days into Wednesday. Where you see these red little dots, those are the cities where we could see some daily record highs falling, and we're going to watch those very closely over the next several days. So we have an extreme heat risk with heat indices of 100 degrees, and yes, some could feel like 110. That's what it feels like to your body. So you want to really make sure you heed all those warnings that we tell you about every year. Hydrate, stay indoors when you can. If you need to be outside, you need to find some shade and spend as little time outside that you can. Look at these temperatures. We're looking at 90s and 100s, 100 degrees. That is the forecasted high today in D.C. The record there is 99, but so many 90s, so many spots near 100 degrees. Burlington, Vermont, New York City, 95 today, 97 in Chicago. Same story as we go throughout tomorrow, 100s in New York City, 101 in D.C. And remember, this is the air temperature. We're going to feel warmer than this. The record in New York City is 96, 90s in Detroit, Dayton, Jackson, Raleigh, 103. That is the forecasted high on Tuesday. Wednesday, we're going to see another hot day, so mid-90s in New York City. But notice we kind of take that downward turn, which is a good thing. On Thursday, 85 in New York City, 79 on Friday. I do want to mention we have warmth. We have a cold front moving through the Central Plains and the Upper Great Lakes, so we could see some severe storms later on today.
But it'll bring cooler air.
Yes, for them. And then for us in New York City area, we're going to see that break by Wednesday.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, an emotional homecoming for a Palestinian activist after 3 months in immigration custody, his message to supporters, and what's next for his case.
But up first, after the break, scary moments in Michigan caught on camera. A Sunday church service interrupted by gunfire. What we're learning from witnesses and investigators. That's next. Stay with us.
We're back with the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of former music mogul Sean Diddy Combs.
The prosecution is expected to rest its case today after Brendan Paul, a former assistant for Combs, testified on Friday about the brutal nature of working for the disgraced singer. Paul said Combs compared his staff of assistance to SEAL Team 6 and would not take no for an answer. A Homeland Security agent also testified on Friday before court was adjourned early.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos is here with more on what to expect from day 28 of this trial. Danny, good morning. So the prosecution spent nearly a month building its case with testimony that's been graphic, it's been emotional. How effective were these last couple witnesses that we saw?
Effective. Brendan Paul may be really the star witness. To some degree, some of the other star witnesses were the ones that were the most sensational, like the victims. But really, when it comes to building the prosecution's case, someone like Brendan Paul is very effective. He's an insider. He was Diddy's longtime assistant, and he's kind of a tragic figure. The theme of this witness is that he may have taken the fall for Diddy's drugs last year when he was stopped and searched and caught a case for drugs that he now says were his bosses, at least implying that. So, again, the real star witness in this case, though, is not really human. The real star witness is data, it's documents, it's records, and this is often the case in federal criminal cases, especially these kinds of white-collar racketeering-type cases. And, for example, you have text messages and records showing that Combs may have paid for prostitutes to come from California out east. That alone gets you most of the way to a conviction on at least 4 out of the 5 counts.
We also saw them spend so much time on the text messages between Diddy and Cassie Ventura, another star witness here. Why so much time devoted to that, and do you think that it's ultimately successful for the prosecution to do so?
Well, first, the government had to, because the defense had these, and to the extent the defense would try to exploit these text messages as showing that Cassie and other victims continually came back to Combs despite all this abuse. But for the government, it tends to show this atmosphere where Combs ruled with an iron fist, which is key, especially to the sex trafficking charges and to some degree the racketeering charges. But yes, this is evidence that we see all the time now in the modern case. Everybody communicates by text, by email. They create a digital wake of evidence in a way that they simply never did 20 years ago. So this is pretty commonplace.
The defense will likely call its first witness tomorrow. One attorney said that the witness list will likely be shorter than originally planned. What do you think the defense needs to focus on right now?
This happens all the time. As a defense attorney, you over budget because you don't want to run too long. But the reality is this. Your case is always shorter than the government's, and usually your case is shorter than you even anticipated at the beginning of trial, because you have to be able to improv. You have to be able to change your strategy as the government's case goes in. So look for the defense's case to be much shorter than you even imagined. I wouldn't be shocked if it only took a day, less than they're even forecasting, which signals to me that the defense's strategy really is one of reasonable doubt. They're going to maybe call a couple witnesses with essential information that they need and then rest on the argument that these witnesses were not credible. Don't believe them because we showed in cross-examination that they're not to be trusted. That'll be the defense's theme, I expect.
All right. Danny Cevallos, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Well, in Detroit yesterday, a shooting was caught on camera at a church. Police say a gunman opened fire outside the building, and then church staff immediately jumped into action to protect worshipers. NBC News correspondent Adrian Broadus has the latest.
But that doesn't mean that we didn't have
terrifying moments as shots ring out at a church in Wayne, Michigan. Captured on a live stream, families seen running for safety after police say a 31-year-old man started shooting outside.
Everybody come to the back.
Desperate parents grabbing their frightened children. Parishioners ducking as they try to escape.
Someone getting guns out of his car and going into the church.
It happened after 11 a.m. at the Cross Point Community Church just outside of Detroit.
The suspect exited his vehicle wearing a tactical vest, armed with a long gun and a handgun. He approached the church building and began firing his weapon.
According to authorities, a parishioner at the church hit the gunman with his vehicle. At least 2 staff members shot and killed the suspect outside of the building.
His motivations are unknown, but at this point it appears he was suffering from a mental health crisis.
I started hearing pop, 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 pop.
Wendy Bowden says she hid in a bathroom.
We were just praying and we didn't know what was going on, but we knew it was bad. And hearing all the gunshots.
Moments before the gunfire, children seen walking down the center aisle as fear erupted across the church. The FBI assisting on scene. As the investigation continues, this congregation grateful.
I just want to hug my mom and take her home, make sure that she's safe.
And authorities say one of the staff members, a security guard, is undergoing surgery. They described his injuries as not life-threatening. Meanwhile, the chief of police say the staff at that church, trained in responding to emergencies, likely saved lives and prevented a mass shooting. Back to you.
All right, Adrian, thank you.
Now to tragedy in Syria, where a suicide bombing at a church during Sunday Mass has killed more than 20 people and wounded dozens more.
Claudio Lavanga joins us from Rome with that and more. Claudio, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Well, that's right. According to the health ministry in Syria, at least 22 people were killed and 63 others were injured in that attack at a church in Damascus. Now, the interior ministry there says that on Sunday evening, a man opened fire with a weapon during service at a Greek Orthodox church in the Syrian capital before detonating an explosive vest. Photos and videos taken in the aftermath of the attack show a heavily damaged altar and blood spattered across the walls. Syrian authorities say the attacker was affiliated with the Islamic State, but the group has not yet claimed responsibility. Let's go now to Santa Catarina in the south of Brazil, where on Saturday 8 people died after a hot air balloon they were traveling on caught fire and tumbled from the sky. Footage aired by local media shows the balloon in flames as it falls to the ground, while video on social media showed 2 people falling through the air as the fire spread on board. Santa Catarina's military fire brigade says 13 of the 21 people on board survived and were taken to hospital. And let's end this tour of the world in the Swiss city of Lausanne, where during a special ceremony, the now former president of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, officially ended his term after 12 years and passed the presidency to the president-elect, Kirsty Coventry. Coventry is a former swimmer from Zimbabwe who competed in 5 Olympic Games in the past. She was elected the new president of the IOC in March this year and becomes the first woman and first African to hold that role. Back to you guys.
Someone we'll see a lot of in the coming years.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Claudio. Yeah. Coming up, continuing coverage on the U.S. military strikes on Iran's nuclear sites.
Up next, what we're learning about the timeline of the attacks and how it could impact diplomatic efforts in the Middle East. This is Morning News Now.
We're back with more on the U.S. bombing of Iran. We're taking a look inside the surprise attack, how it unfolded, and the warplanes and submarines that were involved. NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kuby has the details.
New details about Operation Midnight Hammer. Just after midnight Saturday morning, a group of U.S. Air Force stealth B-2 bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base under the cover of darkness. Defense officials said they were headed to Guam, but 7 of the bombers quietly flew in the opposite direction.
Part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders.
Flying in near silence to avoid detection, the bombers, each with 2 crew members and loaded with 2 30,000-pound bombs each, began their 36-hour round-trip flight, made possible by dozens of tankers refueling them in the air along the way. At 5 p.m. Saturday night, a large group of fighter jets joined the bombers as they approached Iranian airspace. At the same time, a U.S. Navy submarine launched 30 Tomahawk missiles towards Iran. Less than 1 hour later, the bombers entered Iranian airspace and some of the jets sped ahead, targeting any Iranian air defenses that could threaten the B-2s and ready to take on any Iranian jets that scrambled in their path. At 6:40 p.m., the U.S. began striking 3 locations, dropping 14 massive ordnance penetrators known as bunker busters on Fordo and Natanz, just as Tomahawk missiles crashed down on a 3rd site at Isfahan. By 7:30 p.m., all of the aircraft were safely out of Iranian airspace. According to the Pentagon, Iran never fired a shot at the U.S. aircraft.
Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise.
The B-2 bomber, the only aircraft in the world that can deploy the massive bomb, this marked the largest B-2 strike in history. A historic mission cloaked in secrecy.
These
These bunker buster bombs are uniquely suited for a mission just like this. They have an extremely strong outer casing that allows them to penetrate down through the earth up to 200 feet below the surface before detonating about 5,000 pounds of explosives. When you have a site like Fordo that's buried about 300 feet deep underneath layers of reinforced concrete, the bunker buster bomb is pretty much the only weapon that can really take on that mission. Back to you.
All right, Courtney, thank you. And for more on this, let's bring in Jeremy Bash, who formerly served as chief of staff at both the CIA and the Department of Defense. Jeremy, good morning. Thanks so much for being with us. So I want to pick up right there with what Courtney was just saying, specifically about the Fordo site that is deep underground. We know that the president said that these sites were completely and totally obliterated, but we haven't independently confirmed that. When and how will we know the impact this attack had on Iran's nuclear program and specifically that site?
Well, when, many days, maybe many weeks. I would say how, it's going to be a very complex intelligence community task, maybe the most complex battle damage assessment we've ever had to do in U.S. history. Why do I say that? Because, as referenced, a lot of these cascade halls are buried deep underground. So there are limits to what our satellites can see from space photography. So we're going to have to collect the information through other means. For example, we're going to have to intercept the communications of Iranian officials talking to each other, explaining what they're observing inside Fordo, inside Natanz. And we're going to have to kind of sort out who's lying to who's puffing up information, who's telling people what they want to hear. We're going to have to take all of that information, that disinformation, the lies, the truths, put it together in an analytic picture and try to present to our policymakers some assessment of exactly what we accomplished.
Jeremy, Iran has vowed to respond, saying it, quote, reserves all options for retaliation. What could this look like? What are you most worried about?
Well, Iran has threatened to activate sleeper cells inside the United States. Those would be teams of terrorists or assassins who could go after soft targets, synagogues, schools, stadiums, and other places inside the United States, even government buildings. But I also am concerned about our forces and our embassies and our diplomatic facilities in the Middle East. We've got 40,000 troops. We've got a huge troop presence in the Gulf, in Bahrain, in UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, and in Qatar. We also have naval vessels in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And we also have diplomatic facilities that have previously come under fire from Iranian surrogates and proxies. So Iran could unleash rocket, artillery, and mortar fire at our personnel. They could unleash suicide bombers and terrorists. They have many ways of lashing out, but they don't have missiles that can hit the United States. And I think if they directly attack us, that would bring this war to a whole new level of consequence.
Jeremy, President Trump questioned the possibility of a regime change in Iran. This is last night. He wrote this on Truth Social. He said, if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? This is the first time that the president's floated this possibility since Israel launched this war with Iran about a week ago. Do you think a regime change is on the table? Is that a reasonable goal here?
I don't. I think if you look at the example of Iraq in 2003, the lesson we learned is that you really can't push a regime change from the outside at the end of a F-35 weapon. You really have to support organic efforts inside a country to change the regime. And that happened, by the way, in Egypt in 2011. It happened in Tunisia in 2011. It happened last year in Syria organically, and the Bashar Assad regime fell. The example of Libya, when Gaddafi was in power and U.S. and NATO forces helped the opposition, that's kind of a mixed record because in some ways, although Gaddafi was extraordinarily dangerous, what followed him was also very dangerous. And so there's a mixed record in the Middle East of regime change. It always almost has to be organic.
Jeremy Bash, we appreciate your perspective this morning. Thanks for your time.
The Trump administration is navigating some of the political fallout following these attacks on Iran. President Trump's latest actions went against his campaign promises, and even some of his top allies are concerned that war in the Middle East will distract from his agenda at home. Moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, has more on that. Kristen, good morning.
Good day to you. These strikes mark an historic moment for the country, but also for President Trump. As someone who campaigned on ending America's involvement in foreign wars, the president now finds himself immersed in one. with several unknowns looming large. I interviewed Vice President J.D. Vance on Sunday, and it was really notable. Throughout the course of the interview, the vice president argued repeatedly Iran should use this moment to come back to the negotiating table. Take a look.
We have to step back a little bit, Kristen, and remind ourselves that we negotiated aggressively with the Iranians to try to find a peaceful settlement to this conflict. It was only when the president decided that the Iranians were not negotiating in good faith that he took this action. He didn't take it lightly, but I actually think it provides an opportunity to reset this relationship, reset these negotiations, and get us in a place where Iran can decide not to be a threat to its neighbors, not to be a threat to the United States. And if they're willing to do that, the United States is all ears.
But the chances for diplomacy right now seem very slim, given that Iran has vowed to retaliate. And the big question, if and when they do, could that further ensnare the U.S. in the Middle East? Also, part of what's dividing the Republican Party over the president's actions is how it could affect his agenda at home. Top ally Steve Bannon, for example, is making the case that getting involved in a foreign conflict could distract from the president's mass deportation efforts. And the economy is still the #1 issue for voters. Some in the MAGA base want the president to be focused on getting his tax cuts, his border security bill through Congress. It's still facing opposition with no guarantee it can get over the finish line. Back to you.
Kristen, thank you.
Pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil is finally back home in New York City and reunited with his family after more than 3 months in ICE custody. The Columbia graduate was freed from a Louisiana detention center on Saturday, the day after a judge ordered his release. NBC News correspondent Maya Eaglin has the details.
Mahmoud Khalil back home in New York after being reunited with his newborn son and family upon landing at Newark Liberty Airport.
Not only if they threaten me with detention, even if they would kill me, I would still speak up for Palestine.
Released from detention by a federal judge late Friday, the pro-Palestinian activist was a key figure in Columbia University's protest against the war in Gaza during the spring of last year.
The U.S. government is funding this genocide, and Columbia University is investing in this genocide.
He's not resisting. Khalil is a legal U.S. resident with a green card and married to a U.S. citizen. Never charged with a crime, he was detained by immigration agents in March and held for 104 days in a Louisiana detention center.
Release Mahmoud right now!
His arrest triggering nationwide demonstrations against the Trump administration's crackdown on campus protests.
They're agitators. They don't love our country. We ought to get them the hell out.
The Trump administration filed a notice of appeal just minutes after Khalil's release. The 30-year-old missed the birth of his son while in detention in Louisiana and says for now he will be spending time with his family and then continuing to protest.
Whether you are a citizen, an immigrant, anyone on this land, you're not illegal. That doesn't make you less of a human.
Maya Eaglin, NBC News.
Coming up, priced out. As home prices soar, millions of Americans are being forced to rent their dream homes. A look at the trend that is taking root in the suburbs.
Plus, history on the court as the Oklahoma City Thunder celebrates its first ever NBA championship. Morning News Now will be right back.
We are back with an unlikely trend that's gaining ground in America's suburbs. For an increasing number of families, the American dream is now attained with a rent payment instead of a mortgage. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans explains how record home prices are now changing the housing market.
America's suburbs undergoing a transformation.
We're priced out of the market right now, and we're not the only ones.
The dream of owning the house with the white picket fence increasingly giving way to white picket renters. In Lake Villa, Illinois, outside of Chicago, engineer Andrew Decker earns a 6-figure salary and only wishes he and his fiancée could buy a home.
You could buy a house tomorrow if the price was right, if the interest rates were where they needed to be.
But mortgage rates are near 7% and home prices at record highs. Since the pandemic, the median single-family home price has soared almost $100,000, now topping $400,000.
How is that changing the suburbs?
Well, basically what you see is that renting obviously is a much more economical option than buying. And developers have seen this trend that started in 2021 with COVID and they've really built a surge of apartments.
According to new analysis of census data, renting in the burbs is surging so much, 203 suburbs across the country are now majority home renter rather than homeowner. In 15 suburbs, the number of renter households more than doubled between 2018 and 2023.
I don't see any end in sight. I really don't. And I foresee it getting worse and worse over the next 5 years.
Renters like Andrew Decker left wondering how they'll ever be able to buy their piece of the American dream. Christine Romans, NBC News.
Well, adding to sky-high home prices across the U.S., there is a new survey out revealing the majority of adult Americans say they feel financially insecure.
CNBC's Savannah Henao has that and some other money news. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning to you. Yep. So about half of Americans say they need to make six figures to be financially secure, with more than a quarter saying they need to make at least $150,000 a year. Now, that's nearly double what the average full-time worker made in 2023, according to the latest Financial Freedom Survey from Bankrate. Now, a majority of people, well, they don't feel completely secure, including a third who believe they'll never achieve complete financial freedom. Almost half say achieving the American dream is impossible in today's economy. Applebee's and IHOP plan to launch an AI-powered system to provide custom recommendations and deals. The Wall Street Journal reports the system would use a customer's past purchases or similar orders from other people. Dine Brands, which owns those chains, says the system is designed to boost customer loyalty and serve as a way to upsell menu items. IHOP already has some information about ordering habits through its rewards program. And Americans are on the move, looking to make a fresh start in other parts of the country. And while there are several states, cities, and towns that will pay you to relocate there, the co-founder of online directory Make My Move telling CNBC, well, the aim is to reach an audience of move-ready talent to grow their communities. West Virginia is offering up to $12,000 in incentives to prospective residents. Baltimore is awarding $5,000 towards a down payment and closing costs on a home and a 5-year forgivable loan. That's through a lottery as part of the city's trolley tour event, which is held 3 times a year, guys.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right there. Maybe you can rent and get money.
Win the lottery, apparently.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Thanks, Savannah.
All right. This morning, it is raining confetti in Oklahoma City now that the Thunder are the NBA's newest champions. This year's NBA Finals came down to Game 7 in a series that perhaps no one would have predicted would be as close as it turned out to be. Last night looked like it was going to be another nail-biter until the Thunder put on a second-half defensive show in front of their home crowd, beating the Indiana Pacers by a final score of 103-91. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, better known as SGA, was crowned Finals MVP, capping off a career-defining season that will solidify him as one of the top players in the league. This marks the Thunder's first NBA championship since the team relocated from Seattle back in 2008. Congratulations to the Thunder.
Coming up, she's making her art imitate life.
I feel like this is an artifact from that time that can't be taken away. You know, they can erase the murals, but they can't unpaint this portrait.
When we come back, hear from the artist behind a groundbreaking new exhibit at one of New York City's most popular museums. This is Morning News Now. Finally this hour, one artist is using her museum debut to spotlight the importance of representation.
NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton gives us a behind-the-scenes look at the groundbreaking exhibit called American Sublime.
More than 40 stunning paintings of contemporary Black American life, colorful, graceful, and composed.
To have this moment in the Whitney, how does it feel?
It feels like everything that I imagined.
The first major museum survey for Georgia-born artist Amy Sherald, a realist best known for portraits of First Lady Michelle Obama and Breonna Taylor.
I feel like this is an artifact from that time that can't be taken away. You know, they can erase the murals, but they can't unpaint this portrait.
The show American Sublime solidifies Sherald as living legend. She sees her work as destiny, recalling a museum field trip as a child where she saw a painting of a Black man for the first time.
I had never seen a painting that had a person of color in it before. So when I went to that museum and I saw that, I just had a moment. I don't remember anything else except for the class had moved on, and I just remember staying back and looking at that and realizing that that's what I want to do too. I think it grounded me in my destiny.
As a kid, she found representation in family photographs.
It was those photographs that I went back to when I couldn't find myself in art history.
How do you select your subjects?
I'm looking for soulmates. I really don't know how to describe it, but I often give the example of like what it felt like when you met your partner. It's energetic. I think they have kind of a weight to their soul, like they've been here before.
She meets many by chance, like this cool Brooklyn couple.
I think this is all about getting people to think differently about these archetypes that exist. The archetype of family, what a family looks like, of Barbie, what Barbie looks like in this, suburban neighborhood.
The skin always in shades of gray to create universality. The portraits displayed lower than most museums.
It's just about contemplating. He's looking directly at you. What is he thinking about you while you're standing here?
As much as Sherald's work battles erasure, she also wants visitors to feel at rest.
I want them to feel the grandeur, the excellence, the beauty.
And the splendor. Antonia Hilton, NBC News.
That is on the list to check out here in New York. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good Monday morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. It's a busy news morning. America now bracing for retaliation from Iran in the wake of Operation Midnight Hammer. We've got new video this morning of those B-2 bombers returning to home base stateside. They carried out that historic showing of U.S. military might over the weekend, targeting 3 key nuclear facilities in Iran. These before and after pictures showing the massive impact of the bunker-busting bombs deployed in the attack. President Trump taking to the airwaves in its aftermath late Saturday night, warning the Iranian regime that any future escalation will be met with even more force.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. This cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
Across America, swift backlash, including on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle now questioning whether those strikes were constitutional. On Wall Street, investors eyeing the price of oil and how this latest escalation might impact America's economy in the near future. We are covering this developing story from every angle this morning as the U.S. enters an uncertain new era in an embattled Middle East.
Like you said, busy news morning, and we're going to begin this morning in Washington, where NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has the details on these U.S. strikes and the political fallout they unleashed at home. Hey, Peter, good morning.
Hey, Joe and Savannah, good morning to both of you. Following that operation, President Trump has been touting its success, the success of those strikes, and also taunting Iran, saying that the U.S. strikes took the bomb right out of their hands. The president this afternoon will be meeting with members of his national security team here in the Oval Office with a series of major questions still unanswered. Among them, just how successful were those U.S. strikes? Where is Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile? Was it moved? And how will Iran retaliate?
First, those secretive strikes, now the potential fallout. NBC News has learned, according to 2 U.S. officials, that Iran conveyed a private message to President Trump through an intermediary during last week's G7 summit, just days before the president ordered the U.S. attack, warning that if the president launched airstrikes, Iran would respond by unleashing terrorist attacks on the U.S., by activating sleeper cells it said it had in this country. President Trump, while announcing the strikes, delivered this stern warning to the Iranian regime.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
This morning, we're getting a look at the nuclear sites targeted inside Iran. These before and after images show the massive impact of the U.S. attack on Isfahan, one of the 3 Iranian nuclear facilities hit.
Initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
The president earlier going further.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Pentagon officials say it's too soon to tell. It comes as the Trump administration is emphasizing that the attack was intended as a limited one-time strike.
We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program.
The nuclear sites targeted Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo, buried deep beneath a mountain. The U.S. deploying 14 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs for the first time in a military operation. U.S. submarines firing Tomahawk missiles to hit the Isfahan site. In all, 125 U.S. warplanes and 75 precision-guided munitions used. While the vice president and defense secretary have both said the U.S. is not seeking to oust Iran's Ayatollah,
our view has been very clear that we don't want a regime change.
President Trump's now leaving the door open to that happening, posting, if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? With protesters gathering outside the White House and in Times Square, many Democratic lawmakers and at least one Republican, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, have raised questions about the constitutionality of the president's strikes.
We are tired from all of these wars, and we're non-interventionists.
The president quickly lashing out at that Kentucky Republican, Tom Massie, there that you saw, and contributing to the success of the strikes. Administration officials say the element of surprise here. President Trump announced late last week that he would decide within the next 2 weeks whether to strike Iran, but 48 hours later, those B-2s were already on the way. First, the apparent decoys that launched from Missouri heading west. Then the B-2s used in the actual strikes headed east toward their Iranian targets. Savannah and Joe, back to you.
Peter, thank you.
Iran is vowing to respond against America following that attack on its nuclear sites. And this morning, both Iran and Israel are trading missile strikes as that conflict shows no signs of easing. NBC News chief international correspondent Richard Engel has the latest.
This residential area in Tel Aviv was hit by an Iranian missile fired in response to the U.S. military attacks on Iran's nuclear sites. The missile exploded right here, destroying all of these buildings, but also, if you widen out, shaving off the fronts of all of these apartments. Soldiers and volunteers are here, allowing people to come back, search for their belongings, recover what they can. But this does not appear to be over. Iran is saying that it is preparing for a long conflict. Iran's defense minister saying that the U.S. will be met with a, quote, decisive response.
Iran fired more missiles at Israeli cities this morning in several waves. This missile crashing into Ashdod in southern Israel, captured on a dashboard camera. Imagine seeing this out your front window. And now Iran says Israel isn't the only country in its sights. This morning, Iran's military chief of staff saying that by supporting Israel, the U.S. made itself a target, and that Iran could take any action against the U.S. military and interests. We will never back down. An Iranian military spokesman calling President Trump a gambler.
Gambler Trump, you can start this war, but we will be the ones who end it.
But will Iran risk attacking the U.S. directly? Iranian missiles and fighter jets don't have the range to reach the United States. But the 40,000 American troops based in the Middle East could be potential targets and are on high alert. Iran's parliament voted to close the Strait of Hormuz, a potential economic attack. 20% of the world's oil flows through the strait. But no action. Parliament saying the move would have to be approved by Iran's supreme leader. There is anger on the streets of Tehran, protesters denouncing the U.S. and Israel. In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, who thanked President Trump for attacking Iran's nuclear program, now suggesting that Israel may be close to finishing this military campaign, which began with a surprise Israeli attack on Iran 10 days ago. Once we achieve the goals, we will not continue beyond what is necessary, but we won't end it prematurely either, he said. There are no signs Israel is slowing down. Israel is continuing its relentless assaults, hitting runways in Iran at 6 airports, destroying fighter jets and helicopters. Iran's foreign minister is in Russia, trying to restart diplomacy, looking to Vladimir Putin, as no government in the Arab world has come to Iran's defense.
Vladimir Putin today said the U.S. carried out an unprovoked attack, and Iran's supreme leader said the Zionist enemy made a big mistake and would be punished, according to a social media post. He is reportedly in a bunker, not using electronic communications equipment, and has named successors in case he is killed.
All right, Richard, thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in Bilal Saab. He is the senior managing director of Trends US and an associate fellow at Chatham House. Bilal, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's talk through Iran's possible next moves after they've vowed retaliation. What are you most worried about potentially happening?
Well, good morning to you. That menu of responses really hasn't changed. It comes down now to timing, lethality, and the scope. And this is something that the Iranians are going to have to wrestle with for some time now. The menu includes, and I think some of your colleagues have already hinted at a few, missile strikes against U.S. bases, cyber attacks against both the Israelis and the Americans, proudly activating the militias that they still have in the region. Yes, their capabilities are degraded, but they still have some. And they could entertain spectacular terrorism on U.S. soil. And you've heard already the threat communicated by the Iranians to President Trump. And then last but not least is trying to disrupt oil traffic in one of the world's most important choke points, which is the Strait of Hormuz. Not a single one of these, is risk-free. But at this point, if the Iranians feel like, we're hurting, so we're going to make you hurt with us, and we are more resilient than you, then it might just be a course of action that they have to take. It all depends on their threat perception and whether they feel like their entire regime survival is at stake.
Let's talk more about Iran's proxies and all these terror groups they've backed, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, all of which have been weakened in recent months. So because of that, do you think they could play a role in Iran's retaliation? And if not them, are there any other groups out there?
Other groups? I don't think so. I think we know the landscape at this point. If you do sort of like a stakeholder mapping, you've got the militias in Iraq, which I think we worry about the most given the geographical proximity and the fact that we still have troops in Iraq. You got Hezbollah, obviously, in Lebanon, who could decide to open the northern front with Israel once again, even though with the menu of options that is incredibly limited now, given the fact that, as you said yourself, and you're correct, the Israelis have massively degraded its capabilities. And then you got to worry about the Houthis, obviously, in Yemen, who could play a role along with Iran in massively disrupting oil traffic in the Red Sea and in the Arabian Sea. So, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, the capabilities of these actors, all of them have been degraded because of the use of force by the Israelis, but they still have some. They're not dead.
Bilal, as we mentioned, President Trump floated the possibility of a regime change. This was in a Truth Social post last night. Do you think that's at all a possibility? And do you also think it's something that the Iranian people would welcome or not?
Yeah, that tweet was quite difficult to understand, to be honest with you. I don't know if he was speaking philosophically, conceptually, or he's thinking out loud. But the bottom line is, put aside the quote for a second, yes, we could end up in that situation. Because if the Iranians and the Americans get in a shooting war and you try to game this out, right? Then the United States will have no choice but to go after the Iranians forcefully, decisively, and possibly decapitate the leadership. And if you decapitate leadership, obviously the regime is going to collapse. We don't have to change the regime ourselves. We only need to collapse it, except that the ultimate question, the million-dollar question is, what's going to replace it? And there is no organized political opposition in Iran today to replace it, which means we're going to end up in a vacuum in a country of 90+ million people. That's a nightmare for the entire region.
Bilal Saab, thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate your perspective.
My pleasure.
The escalating conflict in the Middle East could have a major impact on the global economy and on financial markets.
As you heard a little bit earlier from Richard Engel, Iran's parliament voted in favor of closing the Strait of Hormuz. It's one of the world's busiest and most important oil choke points. But the final decision has to come from Iran's supreme leader.
NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans joins us now. Christine, good to have you with us. So we're going to hear a lot about the Strait of Hormuz in the coming days. Help us understand why this is so vital.
It is about a fifth of all the world's energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz. These super tankers laden with oil, crisscrossing the globe, and that is a really critical choke point, and Iran controls a piece of that action there. So the concern is if they were to close it or there were a conflict there or for even even if there weren't an official closure, if you had super tankers and companies moving their ships in other places, it can take them longer to get where they have to go, and that raises the price of oil. So it's all about the availability of oil and supply disruptions, and that's what really drives oil prices higher when you get concerned about that.
So just how much higher? Oil prices, gas prices, what could we see?
So overnight, a lot of the analysts are saying $100 a barrel is where they see oil prices moving. You're at 73, 74 right now. If you don't have a resolution of this conflict, if you had some sort of even in protest, a brief closing of the Strait of Hormuz, you'd have oil prices moving higher. And one of the rules of thumb on Wall Street is for every $10 a barrel that you see oil prices rise, that's 20 cents a gallon for consumers. So there's a direct relationship between those oil prices, a barrel of crude and a gallon of gas at the pump. And we've already seen gas prices rising a little bit. They're higher, maybe 6 or 7 cents higher this week from last week. We saw them rise again overnight. And while they're lower than they were a year ago, gas prices had been a good part of the economic story of the U.S. for much of the spring, right? You had prices that were lower. You had the cheapest Memorial Day for gas prices in many, many years. So now you're seeing that trend reverse.
Just big picture economy. We've had a lot of ups and downs already this year, but people might be wondering about their 401ks, their investments. Just what kind of impact could we see to the economy with what's going on in
What's so interesting in the stock market right now is global stock markets haven't reacted dramatically yet. I think caution, watching and waiting, a sense of just kind of holding here to see what happens next. One big analyst I follow called it pop or drop in the stock market. It could pop if you think that you've taken a military or a nuclear player off the nuclear threat off the table for now. It could drop if that spirals into something worse in the Middle East. So I think right now we're still in early days of seeing what's going to happen. As you know, I don't trade in my 401k on international headlines or on national headlines. You buy consistently, hold, make sure that you have your good risk tolerance. So I would say just watch and wait is a good way to look at things right now in terms of what it means for the economy and your overall 401k.
Christine Romans, always good to have you with us.
Thank you, Christine. Well, summer may have just begun, but Mother Nature's turning up the heat this week for millions across the U.S. A relentless heat wave is leading to new health warnings amid record-breaking temperatures from the Midwest all the way to the East Coast. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda is out in Philadelphia with more. Hey, Emily, good morning.
Good morning to you. Well, the National Weather Service posting a short time ago, we simply cannot stress this enough. It will be dangerously hot over the next 3 days, and it's easy to see why. Even at this early hour, we are looking at temperatures in the 80s, and the mercury is expected to rise here in Philadelphia to the triple digits, which if it does so, that would be the first time in more than a decade. Pennsylvanians far from alone in facing this brutal heat. Some 150 million Americans up against heat alerts today. Summer off to a scorching start.
This is not just casual heat we're talking about.
From Kansas City to Boston, people across the eastern half of the country struggling to stay cool amid a sweltering heat wave.
The fans are all on high.
Record high temperatures set on Sunday in parts of Louisiana, Connecticut, and Wisconsin.
It is so hot.
The heat so intense, 2 Major League Baseball players falling ill at their respective games over the weekend. Seattle Mariners' Trent Thornton having to be helped off the field.
And now Trent needs some help off the field.
The pitcher was treated for heat exhaustion at Wrigley Field in Chicago, where it reached 94 degrees. A state of emergency has been declared for 32 New York counties, as Mayor Adams offered this sobering warning in New York City.
It's one of the most deadly weather conditions that we could experience in our city.
It comes amid severe weather on both coasts, leading to deadly incidents. In Lake Tahoe, 6 people died after a boat carrying 10 people capsized and sank due to a severe thunderstorm.
I'd say 3-foot crashing waves, just battering the beach.
And in upstate New York, a tornado tore through the small town of Clark Mills Sunday, killing 3 people and knocking out power to thousands in the region, as the serious summer heat hangs on and threatens records in dozens of cities today.
And on scorchers like this, remember, the shade is your friend. Try to park your car near a tree. Keep those blinds inside your home closed. City officials reminding people that on days like this, conditions like this, it could be just 2 minutes before the interior of your car, if it's turned off, could reach unsafe temperatures. This is a heat that will hang on. The heat health emergency, for instance, here in Philadelphia is in effect through Wednesday evening. You guys know how our producers keep us prepared. We've got the water, we've got the sunscreen, my favorite of all, we've got the fan. So we are bracing for a brutally hot several days, guys.
Oof. All right, Emily, thank you so much.
Those fans will be popular. Let's get to NBC meteorologist Michelle Grossman for a look at the weather ahead. I feel like you should just have a fan on you right now, Michelle, while you're doing the forecast.
Right, just carry that personal fan around all day long, yeah. And, you know, Emily really said it, it's hanging on. So that's when it really fatigues your body. It's dangerous for a day, but we're talking about day 1, 2, 3 days. So we're going to watch that at least until Wednesday in many spots. And temperatures are so above normal for this time of year, so we're just not used to it yet. This is what today looks like. That's the big story today, the summer steam. It's not just the temperatures, the air temperatures, it's the humidity too. So some spots over the next 2 days will feel like 110. We're going to see temperatures 25 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. Now in the middle of the country, it's going to be warm there too. Temperatures are going to be soaring into the 90s, near 100 degrees. We're going to have a cold front that's going to work through. So you combine those two, and we're going to see the risk for severe storms from the Central Plains to the upper Great Lakes. And that will be mainly this afternoon into the evening hours. Further to the west, we are below average there in parts of the Intermountain West. Then by Wednesday, still looking at record highs in the mid-Atlantic, the Northeast. That's before it breaks in terms of the temperatures, because we're going to have a cold front that's going to work through, and that's going to drop the humidity for Thursday and Friday, and also the temperatures. But back to the west on Wednesday, the Northern Plains, the upper Midwest, we're looking at some rain, and some could be heavy. That will bring a flash flooding risk, especially where you see those darker colors. Sunny skies throughout portions of the Southwest, but we're looking at some rain too in New Mexico. Then as we go towards Friday, summer highs heating up once again in the middle of the country. We're looking at temperatures soaring into the 90s there, staying dry in the Southwest. Notice those spotty showers in parts of the Carolinas, the Southeast. Could see some storms there too. And we're looking out once again, starting out the weekend with some wet weather in parts of the Ohio Valley, into the Great Lakes, parts of New England, and also in the interior parts of the Northeast. And that will probably set us up for some rain over the weekend once again. 148 million people under heat alerts. That is a lot of people. Heat advisories, heat watches, heat warnings. About 75 million of these heat warnings are extreme heat warnings. So that's where you see those bright pink colors, and that's where we're going to feel like 110 in some spots. Extreme heat today, heat indices of 100, heat indices of 105, heat indices of 110. That's when you factor in those the humidity into those air temperatures. And take a look at some of these numbers today. Into the 90s, so close to 100 degrees in Flint, Michigan, in Columbus. We're looking at 100 degrees as forecasted high in D.C. The record there is 99. Into the 90s, even into Vermont. We're looking at Burlington, Vermont, 98 degrees. That's going to be your forecasted high. The record there is 96. 95, New York City, Charlotte, we're looking at 98 degrees. That is today. Tomorrow, we're going to do it once again. More 100s forecasted for New York City. The record tomorrow is 96. We're looking at 100 degrees, 101 in D.C., 103 in Raleigh, and so many 90s. 96 once again in Burlington, 101 tomorrow in Boston. So even into New England, we're going to see those temperatures really soaring.
Like records will be shattered, as we like to say.
Yeah, we're looking at 150 records that could be shattered.
Wow, all right.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Ooh. All right, more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including the Karen Reed jurors who are now coming forward and speaking out on what led them to that shocking not guilty verdict.
First, after the break, the growing global fallout over America's escalation in the Middle East, how the embattled region's leaders are reacting to the U.S. breaking new military ground there. Those stories and more next.
We are back now with the latest on the fighting between Iran and Israel as both sides continue to trade missile strikes.
The fighting follows the U.S. bombing 3 nuclear sites in Iran on Saturday in what has been called Operation Midnight Hammer.
NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now from Erbil, Iraq. Keir, good morning. What is the latest in the fighting that's been happening this morning between Iran and Israel?
Well, I think one of the crucial pieces of news this morning is that the Israelis targeted the notorious Ivan prison. Now, that is a prison that has held political prisoners. It's notorious because many people come out of there describing terrible torture. Now, the Israelis have blown the doors off, basically. The Iranians say that no prisoners escaped. But after President Trump's social media post about indicating that he would support regime change in Iran, that is an indication, I think, that that's what the Israelis are thinking of too, because you don't target a prison, effectively try and get the doors off the prison unless you want to release political prisoners and destabilize the country. Of course, as we've been talking about over the past few days, if you are uncertain whether or not you're going to be able to get to all of Iran's nuclear capability, the next best thing, much harder though, of course, is to change the leadership, but it is fraught with challenges.
Keir, you're reporting from Iraq, close to the Iran border. Obviously, there's a concern about just regional stability if this situation continues to escalate. Talk to us about why the area where you are could be a target and just how regional leaders are responding to this U.S. attack at these Iranian nuclear sites.
Yeah, Joe, we're at our post again, just a short distance away from that US base here in Erbil. Let's just show you that. Now, that base, of course, as you can imagine, is on high alert. It's one of the closest bases to Iran, but bases across the region, US bases, across the Middle East, into the Gulf, are all on high alert. We're hearing in Qatar, for example, that staff there have been told, out of an abundance of caution, they're saying, to shelter in place. Some families have been sent home. Airlines across the region, and by the region I mean right the way over to the Gulf, some of those airlines have been cancelling routes. So this region really is bracing itself, Joe, for whatever Iran has to throw at it. And yet at the same time, it is possible that Iran, if you want to put it this way, pulls its punches in order to try to avoid the US getting more involved, which they will know in Tehran that's not a fight that they can win. So a very fragile moment for the Trump administration, but also, of course, for the regime in Tehran.
Keir, Iran's foreign minister is in Moscow holding direct talks with Russian leaders. What are we learning about any potential plans for retaliation, and what could come of those conversations?
Well, the Russians are saying that they support the Iranians, so that's what they're saying on the surface. I think it's a bit more complex than that below the surface. Now, the two countries before all this did sign a deal to support each other, but not go to each other's aid if they were attacked. And here's, it's very complicated, but here's some of the things that we think that Moscow is likely balancing, that President Putin is likely balancing. He wants to preserve his relationship with Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar. Of course, he has a relationship with them because they are all major oil and gas producers. At the same time, he may be wanting to repair his relationship with Israel and with Turkey, and still appear to be in support of Iran. Another thing about President Putin, doesn't like losers, and if he thinks that Iran is losing, then Iran may be losing Russia's support.
All right, Keir Simmons, thank you so much.
We're getting more reaction to the acquittal of Karen Reed following her murder retrial. Jurors are coming forward to speak out about the months-long trial. So has Reed's family, all as criticism builds against the police for their handling of the case. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has the latest.
Hey there, the revealing insights from multiple jurors now taking us inside what happened in that deliberation room, not holding back on what led them to an acquittal, as Reed's family shares what might come next for her. This morning, as Karen Reed settles into her new life post-acquittal, more of those who decided her fate now speaking out. One juror saying she had been leaning toward finding Reed guilty, but changed her mind.
I'm not there to say the defense's story was right or wrong. I think there was things that we saw, things that we heard, the evidence that could have fit that scenario. So again, that's the whole doubt thing.
The jury foreman, asking to stay anonymous, telling the Boston Herald, "We had to look at the evidence, and a lot of it didn't make sense. There was no meat, no aha moment. No one proved there was a collision." Prosecutors accuse Reed of slamming her SUV into her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. But her defense team argued she was framed by police after Reed dropped O'Keefe off at a house party with other members of law enforcement on the night in question. A theory some jurors said they found persuasive.
I think John O'Keefe went inside the house and something happening there.
But some of those who've come under scrutiny through Reed's defense at trial, like the former Boston police sergeant who owned the house, also now speaking out and continuing to deny any wrongdoing.
There are police officers, EMTs on your front lawn. You're an officer.
why don't you just go outside and investigate or take a look?
That's the most ridiculous question that people always ask. What am I supposed to do? Run out front in my underwear and start running yellow tape around the fire hydrant?
As for Reed's family, while relieved the trial is now in the rearview mirror, they acknowledge O'Keefe's death may stay unsolved.
I question that. I struggle with that. I think our family has to make peace with the idea that we may never.
And life will never be the same.
I don't know what will become of our lives. I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were prior to January 29th, 2022.
As for what her brother says will come next for Karen Reed, he says he doesn't think she'll go back to finance or teaching, but whatever she does, the family will support her. Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you. Coming up, the horrors of the war in Gaza hitting home.
After the break, the Ohio summer camp that's helping Palestinian families heal. That's next on Morning News Now.
We're back now with a closer look at what's making news in the world of politics this morning, starting with more reaction on Capitol Hill to President Trump taking that military action in Iran without approval from Congress.
NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us with this. Hey, Ryan, good morning.
Hey, Savannah and Joe, good morning. And here are some of the stories that are making headlines this morning in politics. And we start with that conflict in Iran. President Donald Trump's decision to invade Iran was one that Congress was largely let out of the loop on. And now the question is, will members work to assert their authority in the event that this group of targeted strikes leads to a larger American military effort? In both the Senate and the House, there are resolutions pending which would require the president to seek congressional authority before any military action in Iran. But the administration chose to make the strike before either had a chance to even make it to the floor. Both the Senate and the House are expected to get classified briefings on the situation early this week. Meanwhile, one Republican has drawn the ire of President Trump for his outspoken opposition to the strikes on Iran. Congressman Thomas Massey of Kentucky is leading the resolution to require congressional approval in the House and accuse President Trump of executing the strike while Congress was, quote, on vacation. That led Trump to declare he will lead a primary effort to oust Massey in next year's midterms, Trump calling Massey a, quote, simple-minded grandstander. All this while the work continues on Trump's signature legislative package that is designed to be the foundation of his second term, the GOP mega bill, which will extend the Trump tax cuts, provide billions of dollars in funding for his mass deportation plan, and implement stiff cuts on programs like Medicaid, is making its way through the Senate and could get a vote as early as this week. The goal is to get the bill passed before the 4th of July holiday. And that's where we start the day in the political world. Guys, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, a nonprofit in Ohio is attempting to give children who've been severely injured during the conflict in Gaza a break from the tolls of war. They're doing it by hosting a summer camp for dozens of families with children who are now amputees. NBC News' Yamiche Alcindor spent the day with them.
Here, deep in the woods of Ohio, the laughter of children fill the air. And while this may look like a typical summer camp, this is a special gathering for some of the youngest victims of the war in Gaza. For a week, Heal Palestine, a nonprofit that operates inside Gaza and connects people to medical care around the world, brought them together.
They've lost limbs, they've lost health, they've lost weight, they've lost education, they've lost opportunities. And one thing we want to give them is a chance to be free-spirited children.
The camp bringing together 24 families like Huda Al-Kordis. She came with her 2-year-old son and 7-year-old daughter, Kamer, who lost a leg in a bombing at their home on her 6th birthday.
How important has it been to be able to talk to other mothers who really understand what you're going through?
Yes, it's really important because we all have different stories and we all share our pain.
But this time was also bittersweet. Her husband and 5-year-old daughter, who suffered a head injury during the bombing, remain in Gaza.
I'm happy that my kids are playing here and they're happy too, but it's really hard for me. I don't know what's the real future for my daughter. I don't know that the future of my family there.
According to UNICEF, the Gaza Strip now has the highest number of child amputees per capita of anywhere in the world. Many here told us they were praying for an end to the conflict as they tried to focus on the camp, which featured traditional Palestinian food, accessible games like wheelchair basketball, and mental health specialists.
This mass killing, this
mass starvation that's taken place has given the impression to the people there that they are not human beings, that the lives of their children don't matter. And we want them to show them the love, support, compassion that they've been denied.
18-year-old Sarah Sesso was severely burned in a bombing in December 2023. She says she suffered for weeks without medical care before Heal Palestine flew her to the U.S. for treatment. Her 8-year-old brother died days after the bombing while waiting for help.
Do you feel like you're being healed in some ways by the camp?
Exactly, yeah.
How so?
I can say when I feel myself like feeling bad, I can walk here to hear the birds, the waves, the cold air. It's really good for me, actually.
Feeling some of these families say will stay with them as many move on to continue treatment in the U.S., while others fly to Egypt to continue to receive medical support as they face uncertain futures. Yami Shalsendor, NBC News, Butler, Ohio.
Coming up, is the future of transportation already here?
After the break, how the long-awaited launch of Tesla's new robo-taxi service fared with folks in Austin, Texas over the weekend. That is next. Stay with us.
Welcome back. This morning, tributes are being paid to a man who had a huge impact on American life and business. FedEx founder Fred Smith has died at the age of 80, the company said in a statement. Smith was a Memphis, Tennessee native who graduated from Yale University in 1966 and then enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. He started FedEx in 1973 after serving 2 tours in the Vietnam War. The company's operations began with only 14 aircraft that delivered packages to just 25 U.S. cities. Well, now FedEx averages 17 million shipments per business day. Smith mostly kept a low profile out of the public spotlight, but he will be remembered for being a visionary of the delivery industry.
Other money news now. Tesla's first robo-taxis are finally here.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other financial headlines. Hey, Silvana.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning. Yep, they are here. Tesla launching its robo-taxi service with a handful of riders in Austin, Texas yesterday, with an employee in each vehicle keeping tabs on operations. Now, the first trips are being limited to a narrow portion of the city, with riders, including investors and social media influencers who live streamed their trips. Now, the launch is a crucial test for Tesla as it aims to show it can safely navigate real-world traffic. Bitcoin is recovering after hitting a 6-week low yesterday following the U.S. strike on Iran's nuclear sites this weekend. Iran warning of possible retaliation impacting investors' appetite for risky assets, which include cryptocurrencies. Analysts say market sentiment is pegged to Iran's next move, with reports saying the country's parliament is considering closing the Strait of Hormuz, although the final decision rests with the Supreme National Security Council. And well, neither Zombies or Pixar were able to topple How to Train Your Dragon from the #1 spot at the box office this weekend. The live-action remake from Universal Pictures is the top film again in its second week, bringing in an estimated $37 million, according to ComScore, for a total of nearly $360 million worldwide. Pixar's newest release had a tough debut with just $21 million. That is the lowest opening ever for the Disney-owned studio. Now, the sequel, 28 years later, opening with $30 million. That's the best debut for director Danny Boyle.
Lots of options at the theater these days.
Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot. Every weekend, yeah.
Thanks, Silvana.
You got it.
The 4th of July is quickly approaching, which means many towns across the U.S. are gearing up for their annual fireworks shows. But they're facing a challenge. The U.S. gets nearly all of its fireworks from China. And with President Trump's tariffs set to hit during peak pyrotechnic season, several of those spectacular light shows could cost a lot more this year. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer explains.
Few sights are more dazzling than fireworks on the 4th of July. Yet all the sparkle and sound on the most American day of the year relies almost solely on China. Nearly 95% of the world's fireworks are made here in Hunan province, at factories tucked into the Rocky Hills that churn out all sorts of canisters and colors that light up the sky. Work so delicate, a lot of it's still done by hand. The U.S. imports more than 130 tons of fireworks every year, and nearly every single one of them is coming from China. When President Trump hiked tariffs on Chinese goods back in April, that was peak shipping season here to get millions of fireworks out for the 4th.
In the morning it's 100%, but in the afternoon it's like 200%. So it's very hard for our customer to make the decisions to go or not go.
Shipments were rushed, canceled, or put on hold, leaving U.S. buyers with nowhere else to go.
There's no country in the planet that has this infrastructure and that can do the mass production. There's no other country.
Fireworks are a $2 billion a year industry in the U.S., made up of mostly small businesses that depend on China's supply chain for pyrotechnic parties from big cities to backyards, coast to coast. While most warehouses were already stocked with fireworks for this July 4th, shows in some places may be scaled back and cost more.
The small town USA is not going to be able to afford it. It's going to change the dynamic significantly.
Tariffs are also dimming prospects for next year, the 250th Independence Day, with President Trump calling for a grand spectacle. Industry groups are lobbying for a tariff exemption for fireworks, like what President Trump did during his first term. In a joint letter to the White House, the American Pyrotechnics and National Fireworks Associations said tariffs could cripple the industry, warning the alternative is higher costs or darker skies. Back in Hunan, production lines are already humming with new designs and effects for the U.S. market. These are all samples of new fireworks that are being shipped to the U.S., including this one. Special edition for next year, 250 shots, all red, white, and blue. But even with demand expected to boom, U.S. orders aren't exactly sizzling.
Everybody is waiting for that 90 days.
Nervous.
Nervous, yeah.
And with no other country equipped to illuminate the sky like this, millions of Americans will be watching too. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Hunan, China.
There was no shortage of fireworks on the court last night.
Yeah, when Morning News Now returns, we're going one-on-one with OKC, really two-on-two with OKC's Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, fresh off a Game 7 win that won't be forgotten anytime soon. It's next. Stick around. We are back now with finals glory for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are your 2025 NBA champions.
Yeah, the season came down to a dramatic Game 7 in OKC, with the Thunder beating the Indiana Pacers 103-91. Not only puts a bow on the most dominant season in Thunder history, but it also marks the first NBA title for OKC since the team relocated from Seattle when they were the Supersonics back in 2008.
We're going to speak with two of the NBA's newest champions in just a minute. So exciting. But first, we've got our friend, host of Front Office Sports Today, Baker Machado, with us. Baker,
hi, guys.
Good morning. Great to see you. So just tell us how history will remember this team.
The youngest team, the second youngest team to ever win the NBA Finals. Bill Walton's Portland Trailblazers, actually the youngest. But also, given the fact that this team did so great throughout the regular season, led the NBA in regular season wins. You have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who won the MVP award in the regular season and won it in this tournament as well. It was an incredible season for OKC. And yeah, as you mentioned, the first title they've ever won since they relocated to OKC, formerly of the Seattle Supersonics. A lot of my friends in the Pacific Northwest are still very traumatized
I moved to
by
Seattle
that.
in 2010. Ooh.
Yes, but either way, an incredible season for them. And the best part for them, Vegas still has them as the best odds to win next year. They are loaded with this very young roster of talent, who a lot of them are not going to be making a ton of money for the next couple seasons. So they are loaded to win for the next couple of years.
Bill, we have to talk about the heartbreak for the Indiana Pacers. I mean, scrappy is putting it mildly. No one expected them to get this far, and then to just keep winning and keep fighting, getting all the way to Game 7. Then last night, first quarter, Tyrese Halliburton goes down, which really made it a lot harder for them, though they still fought hard.
I mean, what a series for Indiana. Again, nobody expected him to get this far. And what a series and postseason for Halliburton as well, with so many of those game winners that he won. And the fact that he was dealing with that calf injury all postseason. He said, look, if I can walk, I'm going to play. And he did, which we did see him get injured in the first quarter of the game with that Achilles injury. A lot of people don't know if how much he's going to be playing playing next year. But they got so close to Game 7. And a lot of people would say, look, if Halliburton played for most of the game, maybe it would have been a different outcome. But still, if you're an Indiana Pacers fan, you have to be incredibly excited for the future of that team as well.
Absolutely. Let's talk more MVP, SGA. Just his legacy, how he stacks up against the greats.
I mean, definitely going to be one of the greats, especially because he's literally 25 years old. I mean, he has so much to play. He averaged almost 30 points a game in this postseason. As I mentioned, MVP during the regular season, MVP during the postseason as well. And he won't be under a bigger contract for the next couple years. So he is going to be locked and loaded for OKC for the foreseeable future. So good news for Thunder fans.
Speaking of the future, we have this blockbuster trade we should ask you about. Kevin Durant going to the Houston Rockets. He's 36 years old, but he is still a tough player.
Absolutely. Going to the Houston Rockets, one of the 3 preferred destinations he wanted to go to. And if you see that photo, he found out about the trade while he was at Fanatics Fest here in New York City. He is on stage doing a Q&A, and they say, oh, by the way, you're getting traded to the Houston Rockets. Now, this seems like a pretty good deal on paper for the Houston Rockets, who now have the second best odds to win the NBA Finals after OKC for next year. Phoenix had basically a good haul, the best haul that they possibly could get. They get Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, and they get a first-round pick in this trade as well. Kevin Durant, as you mentioned, almost 37. We'll turn that in September, but still one of the top 5 best players in the league. This is a great deal for the Houston Rockets, who are also a very young team next to Oklahoma City.
All right, Baker, thank you so much.
Guys.
Great to see you.
And now we are lucky to be able to speak with 2 of the newest NBA champions, Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams. Congratulations to both of you. Just an incredible season from start to finish. Chet, I'll start with you. How are you guys feeling right now?
Feeling like we need some sleep, but also feeling like, all the hard work was worth it. A lot of emotions. Not a lot of words to kind of describe them, but, just so happy for the city, the organization. So happy that we're able to kind of share this moment together.
We appreciate your time this morning. I'm sure all you want to do is go rest, but we're so excited to talk to y'all, so thank you. Jalen, you were both drafted by the Thunder in the first round of the same draft back in 2022. What does it mean to win a championship with the team who gave you the opportunity to go pro?
It's extremely rare to be able to come in with somebody that you've known before the NBA and then to be able to do something that an organization has never done. It's special. It's something that you can't make up or fake. And it's just an extremely cool feeling to be able to come in. And there's other guys that were in our draft class too. You got Oos and Jay Will as well that came in with us. And for us to all win it's like I said, it's rare.
Chet, you missed your rookie season with the team because of a foot injury. Just describe how it feels to come back from that and to now have this championship that you helped deliver to OKC.
I mean, it just makes it all worth it. It wasn't all good moments. It wasn't all fun moments. This moment wasn't guaranteed. Winning an NBA championship is never guaranteed. That's why only one team gets to do it every year. But just knowing that we have the talent in the building to have a chance to do something like that pushes you to never quit. It pushes you to really keep going, knowing that your guys need you and you need your guys. And it really showed out there. It was a true team effort the whole way through. And I'm just, so happy for everybody that we were able to get it done. And, it means even more when you truly see what it's like not to have it. So, the game was taken away from me at times. But, this is what all the hard work to get back is about.
What a great perspective. Jalen, what a standout season it's been for you. Even after last night's game, SGA called you a once-in-a-lifetime player, and he said the Finals MVP award was just as much yours as his. How'd that feel?
It was cool, in short. Obviously, he's also a one-in-a-lifetime player. He's definitely more of that than me at this current moment, but it just kind of shows like the bond we all have as a team. Him specifically, like he just understands that he needs a team in order to be successful, and for him to lean in and trust me and the rest of the guys is just speaks to how much he wants to win and how special these moments can be when we all lock in and trust each other. And It makes it really easy to play for somebody that wants to play basketball with you as well.
Your team is so young, and yet you had this record-breaking season that's ending with a title. Looking ahead, you've got 2 first-round picks in the upcoming draft. Chet, how much better could you guys get? I mean, are we looking at the start of a dynasty here?
Honestly, you're talking about draft picks and future and this and that. I'll let Sam Presti worry about that.
Okay, let the go.
Right now, I'm worried about where we are here and now. It's a great day. Getting back to work is not far out from here. But right now, we're enjoying the moment. We'll worry about getting back to work and what we need to get done here real soon, but now's not the time for that.
We understand. Okay, before you get back to work, though, you do get to take part in the city's first ever NBA championship parade tomorrow. What are you guys looking forward to? How are you going to enjoy it?
Honestly, I have no idea what to expect. I've never been through it. So it's the city's first time. It's our first time, too. AC is the only one who can really say that.
He didn't have one.
Yeah,
he didn't have one because of COVID.
Yeah, he didn't have a parade either. So it's going to be all of our first time. Yeah. We're going to enjoy it together. We're going to have a blast. I can't wait to see the whole city come out and have a good time.
So part of celebrating is, of course, popping champagne corks. Tell me, guys, we heard, how did that go for you yesterday? Had you ever had to do that before, popping the champagne corks?
I had never drank up until last night, so the champagne was new. And I actually had Matt pop my cork.
It's national TV,
yeah. I didn't know what I was doing. It was cool though. It tastes gross.
Now you know. Now you know. It is harder than you would think.
Hey,
if
the
you haven't done it
champagne
before.
bottles were not easy to do the champagne showers with. We weren't used to doing that celebration. So we'll leave it at that and not.
We'll let it be. No one got hurt. That's the most important thing.
Oh, thank you, Jalen, for that laugh. Oh, my gosh. Maybe I'll be doing more celebrating with the strength of this team.
And yeah, you can improve on your champagne technique. Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, congratulations. Thanks for your time after what was a long night of celebrating. We really do appreciate it.
We do. Thank you. Congrats.
Thank you. Have a good
Do it for this hour. Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.